Are you truly stepping into the role of leader in your own life the way you know you're meant to? What shifts would unlock your full potential? It's time to explore those answers with the host of Sacred Leadership, intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander.
Welcome to another episode of Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network. My name is Sherisse Alexander, your host on Sacred Leadership with Sherisse. And today, what I'm talking about is identity shifts, and specifically what happens when your soul is evolving faster than your life. There are seasons when something inside you has clearly changed, but your life hasn't quite caught up yet. The things that once made sense, that fit, that felt familiar, the roles, the people, the places, and yet the next version of your life hasn't fully formed. This in between space can feel confusing, lonely, and often emotionally destabilizing. In today's show, I'm talking to that really tender season of identity shift when your soul has moved ahead of your circumstances. I'm sharing why this mismatch happens and why it often feels uncomfortable rather than empowering, and how to stay emotionally steady when nothing around you feels familiar anymore. Today, what I'm inviting you to is gentle grounding for navigating transition without a clear map. You'll hear how creating simple daily anchors can help you soften the internal pressure to figure it all out, and how remaining connected to yourself while your external world slowly realigns is a slow and gentle process with self care, self love, and most importantly, self compassion. Rather than rushing to the next chapter, today I'm trying to reframe the in between as a meaningful and necessary stage of growth, one that often signals deep spiritual acceleration, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. Today is an episode for anyone who feels like they've outgrown their old life, but haven't quite yet arrived into their new version of themselves and what their life will look like, and needs reassurance that this space too is part of the becoming. So, again, welcome today. I am continuing this theme of what it looks like when we engage with this work, and what that feels like very often, and how it can be destabilizing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and how we can maybe create some space and safety for ourselves in mind, body, and spirit. So I want to go back a little bit to a previous episode where, right at the beginning of this year, end of 2025, when I was talking about returning to me and the journey that I took from really shedding those parts of myself, like with so much intention, that I just quite simply did not want in my life. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, in fact, and we were talking about how when you look at your life and you see the things that you don't love, that you don't enjoy, that don't light you up. And I'm not talking about difficult moments or experiences that come up. I'm talking about every area of your life. And if you looked at every single area of your life, as in work, family relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, spiritual growth, personal health, all the things, all the categories. And if you had complete dissatisfaction with all of them, and the idea that we put on the table was, okay, the biggest awareness, or the biggest first step for me, was recognizing that I created this. I created this very likely unintentionally. No, it was intentional, not very likely. It was unintentional. But then when I started seeing all the different ways that I was creating my experience, that's actually the exciting part. That's the part that frees you from staying stuck in that space and place where you're not enjoying your experience. And for me, one of those opportunities presented itself last year, where when I looked around, I wouldn't say that I was completely dissatisfied. I would say that I was um, not as happy as I knew I could be. That's what I would say. And so, if you haven't listened to the episode, I did an episode, I think it was posted on the 31st, and it was called Returning to Me. And in that episode, I talked about what that journey actually looked like. And so for today, I think I'm doing a little bit of a comparison between what that looked like before and what that actually means today. So you could say that what I was talking about in the Returning to Me episode was like this shift, right? Like my soul is pushing me to like go further and evolve, and my life has not quite caught up yet, and how uncomfortable that entire year was of waiting for my life to catch up with where my soul already was. So today, a question I asked myself was, who am I today that I wasn't ready to be back then? And one of the biggest shifts for me was that it finally feels like the inside Sherisse matches what I'm projecting externally. Now, to provide a little bit of clarity on what I mean when I say that, I think that when I would walk into a room and people would meet me and I'd have this magnetic energy and people would, say all these beautiful things like you're so this and you're so smart, you're so pretty, you're so, you're magnetic and I'd be like, "Oh, thank you," genuinely. But I couldn't see it. I didn't see what they were seeing, or there were parts of me that were like really wanting to dim that for some reason. And if you fast forward to where I am at this particular moment in time, I think the biggest shift was is I can own that without apology. And this reminds me of something that my son had said, actually fairly recently. And he was exhibiting these exact same energies of like wanting to make himself smaller so that other people around him would feel like it was safe for them to like show up. And I said to him rather ferociously, I'm like, don't you dare make yourself smaller. Like when we make ourselves just not bigger, but just be who you are. Like it invites everyone else to show up authentically as well. It encourages other people. It gives them the inspiration to do so. So now when I talk about like um the not having the apologetic, authenticity. So now it's like, I am strong. I am smart. I am beautiful. I am magnetizing. I am inspired. I am all of those things. And thank you very much for noticing it. So it's not like I'm saying anymore, oh, please don't pick me and don't see me. Now it's saying, yes, I am absolutely all of those things. So it's owning it. That's the difference. Not just externally where other people see it and I don't feel it, but both. So that is an example of like what full integration, not full because it's a work in progress and I still have my moments, but what the beginning of like that integration starts to look like. Now, as I continue through like this reflection and what does it mean today now that I feel like my life and my soul are finally starting to integrate. Um, Now I don't feel like I necessarily have as much sadness over the parts that I had to let go of. And this is a part that sometimes confounds people. You're letting go when you're shedding these parts of yourself that no longer serve you. You are letting go, and there might be some sadness that goes along with that. And you might not even understand why, because you're actively choosing to consciously move your life in a very different direction. But at the same time, there's still a grieving process, right? You were this version of yourself for a really long time, however long it might have been, and you realize it no longer serves you. So you got to let that part of you go. And so there's the grieving of releasing that old version of yourself, and then there's also the other parts of your life that might not be able to go with you. And this is honestly probably one of the most difficult things is when you're moving and you can't take the people with you. And what I mean when I say that is it's not that they're not welcome. It's that They don't understand the direction your life is going in. They don't understand this new version of you. They maybe haven't evolved at at the pace that you are evolving, so they can't keep up. And for me, I as much as I demand perfection from myself, I try not to demand perfection from other people. Now, remember, I said try. And often, what I'm looking for in my connections with people is, well, are you trying? And if you're trying and you're putting the effort in, then I can honor where you are in your own journey. And if you just don't want to, well, that's part of the process as well. And so sometimes we have to be willing to, not sometimes, often, we have to be willing to like let go of those people and those relationships and possibly jobs and all kinds of other things that might not be serving us anymore. And what that letting go looks like is it's such a personal journey, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fully let go of them in your life. It just means that the dynamic of the relationship has shifted. So, one example that occurs to me is I'm going to use family. This is not me now. While I know that this is actually a thing where parents and children can choose to go no contact, I'm not suggesting that. As much as it might be an epidemic, that's a conversation for another day. I think really more what I'm possibly putting on the table for consideration is just changing the boundaries and what access looks like. So let's use an example. Let's say, for example, this is relatable, and I'm going to use my own example. When I started going through this work with intention, and I realized that being in certain family dynamics was like really triggering, I didn't avoid them altogether, but I certainly limited them. So I would go to the family event, I would show up, I would participate. I can be what some people might misunderstand as being emotional. So if there were things that were said that like triggered me, here's an example actually that I can think of, so I'm going to use it. I remember one time I went to my parents' house and I walked in the door, and my mom has always been very health conscious. And I hadn't seen her in a while, but she didn't say, "Oh, you look like you've put on weight." But the question that she asked was, "Are you losing weight?" Now, story in my head was, "You're fat." So I said, "Well, no." I said, I don't know. I'm like, I haven't been like weighing myself or anything like that. So I have zero clue if I've gained weight, lost weight. But it bothered me because it was literally the first thing that she'd said to me when I walked in the door. And so it colored the rest of the entire experience. And so I got really quiet and I don't know, stayed for maybe a couple of hours and then I went home. The next day she calls me. My mom was perceptive. She called me and she's like, "I noticed that you didn't stay for very long." And I said, "No, I didn't." And I said, "Because you always want to have a conversation about weight, like it's the most important thing that happens between us." And I said, "And I don't want to make our relationship about whether or not I'm 20 pounds heavier or 20 pounds lighter. Like, why is that so important?" So I bring that as an example because in that moment, I shut down and fled. Today, if that happened, I would probably just say in the moment, why are all our conversations about weight? Why is it so important to you? You know, like we can you can inquire about my health without making it about weight. And that is like an example of a difference. And I could probably say that today in a way that I wasn't feeling triggered because again, once I had the opportunity to go away, take a look, see what was going on. That was my thing. I know that my mom is health conscious and I know all the reasons why she's health conscious. And she wasn't saying, "You're fat, you're unattractive, you're this." She wasn't saying any of those things. She's legitimately somebody who cares about heart health. That is her thing. And I know that. So this is an example of how the stories that we tell ourselves when we're going through this work, they show themselves all the time. And how an example of an older version of me was absolutely triggered. Yes, I stayed, but I shut down. I stopped talking to people. I left as quickly as I could. I didn't even follow up with the conversation the next day. My mom did. And how now the beautiful experience that came from that is that 24 hours had lapsed, I was a lot more calmer emotionally. So I was able to say, like, here's why I was upset. And she took that. And now we don't have conversations about weight. We talk about health, but we don't talk about weight. So, anyways, this I'm just trying to use as an example to show how identity shifts happen, how we are letting go of parts of ourselves. And I gave a whole family example of how, yes, I was there and I was present, and what today would look like if this same, and how the shifts actually occurred. So I spoke my truth in that moment. And that's an example of even the beginning of this identity shift. Like when you start to speak up for yourself in ways that are like not abusive, or don't isolate yourself or alienate other people, and how we can do this in a healthy way. So that's an example of how you can begin to set boundaries with people without cutting them out of your life. And that can simply just be in speaking your truth. When we get back from our break, we will continue this discussion of your soul evolution and that whole transition. We'll be right back.
Leadership isn't reserved for CEOs or world leaders. It's something each of us is called to embody in our own lives. But how do you awaken that inner leader with clarity and confidence? On Sacred Leadership with intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander, you'll discover powerful tools and spiritual insights to align your words, actions, and outcomes. Tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific, right here on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Sacred Leadership with Sherisse Alexander. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network, where today I am talking about identity shifts and what happens when your soul evolves faster than your life. In the first segment, I was just recalling a previous episode a few weeks ago that was titled Returning to Me, where I went through a fairly detailed process of my journey through heartbreak and despair and the death and the rebirth that happens as your soul is evolving, and then the transition eventually to living this new version of myself, this stronger yet somehow softer version of myself. And it is a bit of a contradiction, because I'm saying, and I do definitely feel stronger within myself, but almost like it's not hard. It's got these soft edges to it. So, anyways, continuing on with when the soul moves faster than circumstances, it could feel, when you are internally a lot further ahead than your external reality, like you could feel this in your nervous system. It could feel very chaotic. You could feel things like um, maybe a sense of anxiety, just overall impatience. I think that's the word that I would use. Almost this craving and this impatience for this peace that you can feel inside of you, that's like wanting to come together, or it's definitely feeling like it's gelling and coming together internally, but externally it almost feels like frustration. That's how I would put it, because you're doing the work, you're putting in the work. And I think the reason why it's so important to have this conversation is because if you are there, don't stop. Do not be discouraged. It is perfectly normal and very okay for there to be that messy middle. I love that phrase, right? The messy middle, where it's really uncomfortable because it's not fully integrated, and it can be really frustrating where you're like, I'm doing the work, I'm doing the work, I'm doing it, I'm engaging, I'm having the courage, I'm facing myself, and it's not being shown externally. And this is really where the faith comes in, because that's what faith is. Faith means that you have blind trust and blind faith and knowingness in something you can't yet see. So, this is meant to invite and encourage you to continue on the journey. There's nothing wrong with you, you're not broken. This is just what the messy middle feels like. And so, once you are there, this is where all those other practices come in. This is where the self care becomes really, really important, right? The breath work. I still have these moments, these things where I'm trying to, I'm actively integrating these principles and these modalities into my life on a daily basis. But to tell you, and this is me being super vulnerable with you, to tell you that like it's not perfect. And if you have an expectation that it's going to be perfect, and I'm saying this as much to myself as I am saying it to you, you're going to disappoint yourself. Quick example, tiny things, but the last week has been chaos, absolute chaos. There's a lot of things going on. Yes, we're back into the new year, but we're putting these systems in place, reorganizing things. I've got the podcast, I've got the leadership thing, I've got my personal life. It feels like chaos everywhere. And yesterday, I was having a full moment of wanting control and perfection. Full moment. And I could feel myself getting so frustrated within it. And then there was like this moment where I was like, literally, stop, take a seat, take one deep breath. I'll be honest, I had a full 1 minute cry, but I felt better. And then I was having a conversation with myself. I was like, why are you so upset right now? Like, it's not like you're running to catch a plane. You're going to drive on the highway for a few hours. Like, there's no emergency here. Why are you so upset? And what it came down to was I was still chasing perfection. I wanted my day to be like this. I wanted this week to be like that. And this week has been anything but that. And the frustration that I was feeling was like this chasing of perfection. And I say that now because this journey is not that at all. So if you are somebody who needs perfection to feel like you have a sense of control, you might need this. Or if you are somebody who needs perfection, this might, I don't know, it's up to you. You take what resonates, right? You either need it or you shouldn't do this, because if you're somebody who needs everything to work out perfectly and for it to all be logical and for all of it to make sense, this is not that. So I say that giving you that context, it's a daily thing. And I just gave you an example yesterday and again today of this need for perfection, and really challenging myself now to remind myself to stay fully present, to stay fully in the moment. Don't worry about what happened in the past. The stuff that's coming in the future, you will deal with it as it comes. So that's an example of what I'm talking about, where I know these things logically and I'm trying to bring them into my experience so that I can live them, but it is like constant. And so if that sounds exhausting, I'm not trying to make you feel exhausted. I'm trying to highlight for you that this work gives you opportunities all the time to practice these things and to show up very, very differently. Now, the other thing that I've observed is the misunderstandings that often occur, that can occur when people are still responding to an old version of me. And this is another example of that transition phase, right? Your inner self is not quite matching your outer experience. And even the people in your sphere that are still around are maybe a little confused. And so I found myself saying things, and I think that this quietly says to other people, stop measuring me by an old version of myself without saying that. And here's the phrase that I find myself often using. So if I'm talking about someone, if somebody's asking me a question about someone, it's not unusual for me to say, a version of that person that I'm familiar with used to be like this. I don't know what they're like now. I can't comment on that. And so when I start saying things like that, you're quietly signaling to the other person, stop judging me based on a previous version of myself. We are literally changing every second, every minute, every moment of the day. So a version of me you met last week might not be the version that is here today. And so I bring that up as a way for you to begin to help others integrate with this new version of you. Oh, I love how this light is coming in like this. Sorry, I just love it. So I had to comment on it. But I think that if we can start to invite people into the conversation in that way, you're very subtly saying, stop judging me for an old version of myself. That version of Sherisse or whatever your name is doesn't exist. Deal with me right now, here in this moment. And today reminds me of a conversation that I was having actually with my daughter. And I had said to her, she was asking me, yeah, again, about somebody. And I'd said to her, I said, I don't know. I said, my experience with this person has been this. And I said, and they don't really know this version of me because we haven't locked in like that. So they're making judgments, assessments, and telling themselves stories based on whatever's going on with them, but they've never really engaged consciously with this version of me. So something I said 2 years ago, and that's what we were talking about, something that happened literally 2 years ago. So I said something that happened 2 years ago, and I know what my energy was at that point in time because I remembered the event. And I said, but this person doesn't know me. So they're making an assessment based on stories other people have told them, stories that they're telling themselves, and literally a 3 second interaction, 3 minute interaction that they had with me. And they don't have any idea of who Sherisse is at this moment in time. So when we start to use verbiage like that, we begin to invite other people to open and soften their heart. And in this conversation with my daughter, the other point that I'd made to her is that I try not to presume in conversation that I know what someone is going to say. Because she had said in this particular dialogue, she's like, oh, well, this person might respond like this. And I said, I don't know how that person's going to respond. And I said, and I feel like if I hold space to allow that person to respond, how they feel like they need to respond in that moment, I feel like the energy I'm literally putting out is far more open than locking them into responding in an old version of their selves. So that's another invitation that I would put here as we begin to integrate our new versions of ourselves with the people in our experience, is these things matter energetically, the verbiage that we put, the intention that we're putting out there. If we can begin to soften the walls around expectations of how people are going to respond, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, then that has a reverberation through the energetic field. So now I don't know how that person's going to respond. If they respond to the way my daughter said, okay, she was, and it's not even about right or wrong, great. Then they responded in alignment with what she thought. If they don't, then great. We've opened up the energetic space for something new to make way. Now, I did touch on a little bit before talking about the grieving piece of letting go of these parts of yourself that no longer are relevant for where you are now or even where you're going. And I do want to talk about that a little more, but we are about to take a break. But before we go to break, I just wanted to say that if you are enjoying the content that I am bringing you week after week, please go find me on your favorite listening platform. Follow me, subscribe, comment, send me an email. You can always reach me at Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. That's SHERISSE at pavitraleadership.com. You can also find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. We will be right back where we will continue talking about identity shifts and what that process looks like. We'll be right back.
Leadership isn't reserved for CEOs or world leaders. It's something each of us is called to embody in our own lives. But how do you awaken that inner leader with clarity and confidence? On Sacred Leadership with intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander, you'll discover powerful tools and spiritual insights to align your words, actions, and outcomes. Tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific, right here on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is Sacred Leadership with Sherisse Alexander. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network, where today what we are talking about is identity shifts, and specifically what happens or what it feels like when your soul evolves faster than your life. I'm sorry, guys, but this backlit rays of sunshine that are coming in today, I'm loving the whole effect. So I hope it's not too much or too intensive on your side. But right before the break, I was just about to touch on the grief, the piece about outgrowing your identity. And I did touch on it a little bit before when I spoke about letting go of previous versions of yourself and sometimes having to let go of people or jobs or any number of things in your life. But the other important piece of that process is really honoring what once worked. And when we can start to recognize that those things that we're letting go of, they're not necessarily bad. They were protective mechanisms or coping mechanisms that we employed to give ourselves a sense of safety and security. Because at the end of the day, that is all what we are looking for. We are all looking to feel safe, secure, welcomed, and I'm talking about into your tribe, loved, supported. So we dance, we do gymnastics so that we can fit into the ideas and beliefs and expectations that other people have so that we can create that sense of peace and safety for us. So when these structures start to break down or when there starts to be like dissonance within you, it's not because you're broken. It's because your soul is saying, hey, this isn't serving you anymore. So it's really important to actually go through that grieving process and allow yourself to honor with what once worked for you with awareness, understanding, forgiveness, compassion, all of these things that we talk about extending to other people, we got to be willing to extend them to ourselves first. So as you're going through this grieving process and this honoring what once worked, maybe some questions to ask yourself are like, what are the identities that you might be inhabiting that were never false? They just were no longer true. And that's what I'm talking about, right? It's not broken. It's just, it's not serving you. So if I use myself as an example, I can be a people pleaser. And I know when I'm doing it. And I know when I can feel it within me. It has this real energy of like competing and proving myself, right? And I see it like all the time. And once you start to pay attention to these things, you can't unsee them. And so when I see it, it's just like, oh, why do I feel this energy within myself of like feeling like I need to do this to prove my worth to someone so they can find me valuable, right? And I talk about these things probably frequently because I want you to know that they come up all the time, right? The big things, there's the big ways that these things come up, but then there's the teeny tiny things that come up that we do. And I'm like, and I'll actually ask myself after, I was like, why did I agree to do that? I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And then I go through this whole dialogue where it's like, oh, there it is. I'm people pleasing because I want this person to think I'm valuable, because if I'm valuable, then they'll like me and they'll want me and they'll love me and all these, right? This is how it goes. So that's an example of an identity, or identifying the identities that we were holding that quite simply are no longer true. And for me, that one of people pleasing, that is a constant work in progress. That one is, and that's a common one that shows up for a lot of people around people pleasing. And the important question to ask yourself when you're identifying these roles or these identities that you were holding was, well, what was I protecting myself from? Now, in the case of myself, where I'm saying, okay, I was people pleasing, I was protecting myself from being, my gosh, the word excommunicated from the tribe, right? Not being accepted, not feeling a sense of worth, value, acceptance, love, all these things. So, to a certain extent, I was protecting myself from being ostracized and not part of the group. And that is where, when we start to show up differently, where we can start to say things like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it doesn't always have to be that way. I find myself showing up in these ways of where I'm saying very clearly to people, like, here are the reasons why we can't. And when I say we, what I'm saying is me, why I can't continue to show up like that, because it doesn't resonate with what my core values are. And I'm no longer willing to do things that make me feel horrible about myself. That's really honest. And I think that people can really honor that. I'm not making a judgment of what you choose to do. I'm telling you what it is that I'm no longer willing to do, right? To fit into this box of acceptance. And as soon as we start to doing that, I think what ends up happening is people actually start to respect you more. And then they start to question how they're showing up and what they are prostituting of themselves in order to be loved and accepted and so on and so forth. And so with that, I wonder, if I didn't have those earlier versions of myself, right? And this is why I also try not to live life in regret. We often can get pulled into, oh, if I made a different decision, if I was this back then or that back then, maybe my life would be so much better. So the question I pose is, would you? Would you actually? I don't regret those older versions of myself, the ones that people pleased and did, like, relationship gymnastics to be loved and accepted and so on and so forth. I do not regret those versions of myself at all. Because how could I possibly be this version of me today if I didn't have those previous iterations? And that's the beautiful thing about this journey. And so if you find yourself getting pulled into judgment, shame, blame directed at self, again, I can't continue to remind you enough about how important it is to have grace and compassion and forgiveness for those parts of yourself that just quite simply didn't know any better. But once you do, and that's the juicy part, is once you have the awareness, once you have the knowledge, well, now it is fully on you. So if you are choosing to show up in ways that are still those, now, again, remember I said there's not perfection in this. It's okay to, like, um, you know, regress every now and again. That's part of learning. What I'm talking about is looking at it and flipping the situation, the bird, and saying, no, I'm still going to choose to like grip onto this old version of myself. I am not letting go. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. This journey does not work like that. So when that grief comes up within you, I invite you to slowly begin to let go of this previous version of yourself. It's okay. The unknown can be a little terrifying because we don't know what's on the other side of it. But it's okay to actually acknowledge within yourself and say, like, um, you know, to yourself, what you can actually say is, thank you so much for serving me in what I needed in that moment in time, but I no longer need this people pleasing tendency in order to be loved and accepted. And it sounds silly, but you're talking to your nervous system. That's what you're doing. You're talking to your body. You're talking to your mind. And so when you do that, and just try it next time. You don't even need to say it out loud. Next time you find it coming up and you can feel yourself gripping it. So if we go back to the example that I used, I could see in a meeting my people pleasing tendencies coming out, agreeing to do all the things and be all the things for all the people. And then afterwards, the anxiety of adding one more thing to my plate. What I can do for myself next time is say, you don't need to do that anymore, Sherisse. You can put a boundary of what you can actually put on your plate. It's okay. These people still love you, still accept you, still want you in the fold. It's okay to let go of these parts of yourself in order to move into this new version. And all of this conversation is super relevant because of the time of year. Chinese New Year is coming, and I keep talking about it because Year of the Snake is almost over, and I am so excited. I am done with the shedding, let me tell you. And so I find myself now, right now, actually very consciously thinking about the conversations. In fact, this morning, great example. This morning, I sent a message to someone and I said, there's a conversation I need to have with somebody. Are you okay if I have it? And it's kind of it's a group conversation. So I'm asking for consent. And you might be like, well, why? Long story short, it felt like something I needed to do. I'm letting this person know I want to have a conversation with someone else. And when I was running it by my daughter, she was like, well, why do you feel like you need to do that? And I said, I don't know. I'm like, this person's been on my mind. They've been coming up over the last couple of weeks. Actually, they were coming up in my mind from last year, like the end of last year, like December and such. And I said, and it just feels like something that I need to put to get bed for myself. Perhaps I'm overreading or misreading the situation or overanalyzing it, which I can. I'm a mental dweller, so that's what I do. But when things consistently come up in my brain, I don't just discount it. When they repeatedly come up, to me, that's like a message or a nudge from my higher self, my spirit team saying, like, no, this is something that you want to put together, put to bed, and you don't want to carry the energy of it into 2026 or throughout 2026. Regardless of how it unfolds, that's a conversation that I feel like I need to have in order to lay that piece to bed. And that's another example of letting go of previous versions of yourself, especially when it comes to getting other people to get up to speed with like where you are at this moment in time. So I'm happy to report I got the go ahead to go ahead and have that conversation. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to reach out to the person. I'm just going to say, hey, listen, I'd love to get together for a coffee and just like, gist and put some things to bed. I'm not going to say all of that, but the point being is I'd love to get together and have a coffee with you so that we can just kind of talk about some past things that I can just set the record straight on from where I'm coming from so that you're not making assumptions based on other people's stories and you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth versus all this other chaos and noise. So it's important for all of those things in my mind, for me, anyways. I don't know what your process could be very, very different. I'm just sharing the things that I do to shed the weight of the past and really let it go. 2026 feels like this very exciting, hopeful, energetic year, and I'm a horse, so that might be why, as in it's the year of the horse. So that might be the reason why I'm so excited. So I don't want any of this lingering energy to be attached to me. So these things that come up, and this is not only the one example, there are many things that have been floating in my head, not many, two people that I can think of in the last month that have been in my brain. And I just feel like there are conversations that need to be had to just say, here's where I am. I still love you, and let's keep pushing. So, my question to you before we go to our next break is there a part of you that needs acknowledgement before you can release? And that's an important part of this phase. Is there a part of you that you need to have a conversation with, that you can say, it's okay. Thank you so much for trying to keep me safe, but it's okay now. I got us. Because really, what you're talking to is your ego. You're having this connection with your higher self, your spiritual self, your knowing self, with your ego self, which is just trying to keep you nice and safe. That's its job. That's what it does. I'm never going to discount the value of the ego, but that's the conversation piece that you're having. So the question is, right before we go to break, is there a part of you that needs acknowledgement before you release it? And with that, we will go to our last break. We'll be right back.
Leadership isn't reserved for CEOs or world leaders. It's something each of us is called to embody in our own lives. But how do you awaken that inner leader with clarity and confidence? On Sacred Leadership with intuitive business coach Sherisse Alexander, you'll discover powerful tools and spiritual insights to align your words, actions, and outcomes. Tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific, right here on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is Sacred Leadership with Sherisse Alexander. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Leadership with Sherisse here on the Inspired Choices Network. Again, if you are enjoying the content that I am bringing you week after week, please go find me on your favorite platform and give me a review. Alternatively, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Sherisse at pavitraleadership.com. That's SHERISSE at pavitraleadership.com. Now, sometimes getting back to the topic of today, identity shifts, and what does it feel like when the soul has evolved faster than your external life? Sometimes what I do, and some of you may have seen this before, is I will pull cards right before an episode to help like give me visual cues or to really anchor what it is that I'm talking about. And true to form, the cards are like so bang on. But if you're familiar, these cards are all swords. And swords are all about mental dwelling, a lot of thinking, a lot of overthinking. And why I brought that up is because that first phase of like letting go of the parts of me that didn't serve was like a lot of questioning and am I doing this? Does it make sense? Like, do I need to do this? Like going back and forth, like literally an internal battle with myself until I finally decided to let it go. That is what a Eight of Cups is. It's walking away from something. And that is a vision, a very, very pictorial depiction of me saying, you know what, I don't got the energy for this noise. I'm going to leave this behind. And that is what the invitation is here. Instead of fighting with yourself over and over and over again with the swords, just let it go. Walk away. There'll be something else, right? Then there's the death and rebirth, which is that phase of like, walking into the something new. And then the last few cards we'll save for a few more minutes. Now, when you're going through this, if you're anything like me, you might want to hurry up and push through. I'm just going to strongly recommend that you don't do that. Because as a coach of mine had said, when we try to rush through, and I'm somebody who is very, once I have made a decision about something, I am, met pedal to the metal and I want to forge through. I do not waste time. And this is the risk, is you will skip steps. And if you skip steps, inevitably you will have to come back and do it again, and it will show up and you'll be like, didn't I go through this? Why am I going through this thing again? And the reason why you're going through it again is because you missed something. So what I'm saying is like, if you really try to force yourself to quickly move through this, you're inevitably going to slow yourself down. So be patient. Be patient with your nervous system. Be patient with your overthinking. Be gently persistent with this process. Allow yourself to begin to feel into what safety in this transition looks like. And safety in this transition is the hanged man, being very okay with sitting still and not rushing the process, beginning to create a safe space for you to cocoon. I'm naturally somebody who processes by myself. I, in fact, really quick story because we're getting to the end here. I had a situation come up this last week where I was very activated. I was angry. And I just sent a couple of messages to this person and just gently asked them to withdraw. And when I had the conversation with this person, they're like, well, you shut down. I said, no. I said, I don't shut down. I said, what I was doing, I said, I'm a processor. And I implied that you should actually know by now that I am a processor, and that when I'm not speaking, it's because I'm upset and I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret. So I am making sure that I have regulated my emotions before I say something that I will regret. And I bring this up because that is an example of making sure that I'm creating a space for myself first and foremost. It's not like I completely shut the person down. It's not like I wasn't talking to them. I wasn't talking to them in the frequency that they're used to, but that's honestly not a me problem. My first and foremost is to make sure that this is calm, that this is at peace. And I was actually protecting her in that process, whether she knew it or not. But I did explain all of this to her so that she was very cognizant that what I was doing was emotionally regulating so that I did not have a blow up kind of situation. The other thing, as we are getting down to the last few minutes of today's episode, some questions that I want to leave you with. Have you found that your body is asking you to slow down, even though your vision is like laser sharp, very, very clear? And so, an example of this is like knowing exactly what you want your life to look like, but your body is like, you get sick or you're tired or any number of these things. And that happens all the time. And when you are integrating, like releasing old versions of yourself and allowing new versions of yourself to come in, it is not unusual for you to be extremely tired, irritable, all of these things. And all that I can say myself, I've been going through this, this early part of this year, and I definitely feel like a lot of it is just kind of getting rid of like these last remnants of like old parts of myself. You know what I'm doing? I'm honoring it. If I need a nap, I'm taking a nap. And I find that like 20 minutes is more than enough to just kind of relax for a moment and then get back into it and continue going. So, for only thing that I can say to you is that if your body is really encouraging you to slow down so all of these things can come together, please honor that. Please do not force your way through. This journey is not a by fire or by force kind of experience. It is meant to be done with, again, love and gratitude and forgiveness, compassion, removing shame and removing judgment and all of those things. And how do you practice these things without, if you're forcing through, you're going to slow yourself down, and you're ultimately you're not going to speed anything else up. Thank you so, so much for joining me today. I hope, as always, that you find value in the content that I am bringing. As I'm wrapping this up, this was the final card, which is such a lovely card. It is the 10 of Cups, which means complete bliss. Everything feels great. Thank you. Okay, not everything, but overall, I'm happy. So thank you
Thank
so
you
much
for listening
joining
to
me
the
today.
Sacred Leadership Show. Sherisse returns Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific on the InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, continue taking small steps today to be a leader in your life for the collective.